can start in 1 minute.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, look. You can start.
All right. So let's get started. Please settle down. Welcome. It's great to be here. I think the conference is getting a little bit quieter. Certainly upstairs it was slightly quieter than it was yesterday, but I guess it's not quite the right time to like dismantle this sign here for souvenirs. So anyhow, it's wonderful to be here. This is, I think, the second year in a row that I'm doing this presentation. So in many ways, this is a bit of a status update. I've been looking forward to doing this for a couple of weeks now. So yeah, we have about 30 minutes. We have this wonderful theater. So let's make this entertaining as well. So I'll leave some time for questions at the end. I'm sure you have some burning questions about the Brave project. So save those for last, and we'll have a conversation as well. So. I'm Ben Livshits. I'm the chief scientist for Brave. I run the research team there, and I'm mostly here to talk about some updates to the project itself, although I'll mention a few kind of researchy topics from time to time. That's not necessarily the focus of today. If you're interested in that, please go to brave.com/research, and you'll see all sorts of exciting and novel things that we've been working on as well. All right, so this is working. So I wanted to start with some numbers. So these are the key numbers I wanted to start with. So we have, at this point, close to 12 million monthly active users. We have some millions of daily active users as well. And these users are split somewhat evenly, not exactly 50-50, but reasonably evenly across mobile and desktop platforms. That is to say, 4 different platforms that the browser ships on: Windows, Mac OS, Android, and iOS. These numbers are a tiny bit out of date. This is from the end of 2019, so there's been a little bit of growth since then as well. And this is in many ways the money shot. Yeah, this is what I wanted to open up with. And I wanted to mention a few things about this as well. So first of all, Brave is probably, almost certainly actually, the biggest crypto-related project that is out there. Certainly some exchanges have a significant number of wallets and a less significant number of users, out of whom still fewer are active. But I think this number is really not there for the majority of crypto projects that we genuinely see as of today, which is mostly a good thing, I would argue. But here's something else that I wanted to point out, which is once the number of users you have reaches a certain point, there is a certain transition that your project takes, which is to say you're no longer talking to crypto users, right? So there will be a fraction of Brave users who are interested in crypto, and I'm sure many of you in this room. Let's actually do a show of hands. I always do this kind of thing, but how many of you here use Brave? Yay, all right, so great. So this is a highly non-representative audience here in this room. So you're all welcome to be here. And again, as I said, very much looking forward to this conversation. But the problem is that, of course, how many users out there really deeply care about crypto, like on the planet? I mean, I would estimate something like less than 1 million personally. That would be my personal estimate, just based on the gut feeling. So clearly, the majority of people in that 11 million set are way outside of crypto, which means a few things. But one of the things it means is that we need to provide interesting scenarios and, dare I say, incentives for them to use the browser with or without crypto. We are not necessarily there to, quote unquote, convert them into crypto aficionados. Some of them will convert naturally. That's fine. That's a great outcome, I think. But that's not necessarily the goal. And I think that would be really quite difficult to do. And so the way we position the project is that really the browser itself should appeal to people based on the first principles, whether or not they choose to engage with crypto. And let me just kind of remind you what some of those principles are. And if you've listened to one of these Brave presentations, you might have seen this slide. But basically, it highlights the fact that the Web 2.0, not Web 3.0 just yet, Web 2.0 is quite a bit out of whack. It's quite inefficient. It's really shifted away from some of the first principles, some of the initial design principles, to a point where, for an average user, due to ad tech, advertising, the web is not really nearly as great anymore, so it's a lot slower than it used to be. It's a lot more invasive. There are sites like TMZ, for example, is a favorite poster boy for some of this, has tons and tons of trackers, in some cases hundreds of trackers. Because of that, people pay for their data plans excessively, and of course, there are security vectors that are enabled because of ad tech as well. And this is the most basic of problems that the browser aims to address that Brave solves, right? So blocking ads out of the box. And as a result of that, you can see that this is somebody's evaluation. There's a company, I think, in Paris called Green Spectre that published this report a few months ago. But this is a comparison of battery consumption on mobile devices across the popular browsers. And so Brave comes out on top. So in this case, bigger is better, means that the battery lasts longer, yes? And so that's kind of what you have. And why do you have this? Because of ad blocking. That's a very simple observation, but it actually works. And that's why, millions of customers like it. It's not necessarily because of the crypto connection. We'll come to that later. It's because the basic product is, in some fundamental ways, quite a bit better than some of the alternatives. How about some animation there? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, yeah. So these are some of the things that have to do with the value proposition, right? So let's just go through this step by step, if you will. So there's a focus on speed, privacy, security, as well as concerns such as battery life. How does this get accomplished? It's because of blocking data grabbing ads as well as trackers, third-party trackers. Now here's, so far we haven't even talked about crypto, have we? Now here is a crypto bit that I wanted to mention. This is the first time we're starting to talk about this, and then as we proceed, there'll be more and more. As of today, on all the platforms that Brave is shipping on, and this is quite new, this is as of the last several months, and we roll this out gradually as well, first on desktop and then gradually on mobile platforms as well. We have support for opt-in privacy-respecting ads that reward users with redeemable tokens. And this is the connection to crypto. This is where BAT, basic attention token, or BAT, comes into the picture. And let me actually omit the last bit. We'll come back to that later. OK, so we start with something that doesn't actually have crypto at all, and then gradually add crypto to the equation. And again, back to sort of the fundamental problem that we are trying to solve here. So Web 2.0, the way it exists currently, or the way it's existed for the past, let's say, 5 years or so, has been a combination of these factors that are shown on this slide over here, things like third-party trackers, as well as malicious ads and malware and things of that sort, as well as a shift of power from the open web to a combination of what's called walled gardens, right? The likes of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and a few other platforms like that being places where users spend often the majority of their time. Right? It's very simple, right? Go approach any teenager in the street, they'll probably be looking at Instagram, they'll probably not be using a web browser most of the time. So the browser, the Brave, is an attempt to basically reimagine the equation. And to do so, we basically need to start focusing on what's shown at the top of the slide. I call this the Bermuda Triangle of advertising. So we have 3 players here, 3 participants, or 3 types of participants. We have users, we have creators, content creators. We often call them publishers as well. Although these could be bloggers, these could be even people who publish things on Twitter, for example, as well as advertisers. And this is the flow as of today. So, and this is a flow that's enabled by what's called Brave rewards, which is this privacy-preserving or privacy-respecting mechanism of delivering ads within the browser itself. Now, let me kind of separate, page-embedded ads that have been there for decades at this point, yes, that exist, that are built using HTML and JavaScript and images and so on and so forth. And let me separate that from these ads that I'll show to you in just a few minutes that are embedded in the browser. And because of embedding these techniques in the browser, technologies in the browser, we basically have a chance to reimagine the way this is constructed from the very foundation, from the get-go, and do so in a way that's, as I said, more secure, as well as more privacy-preserving, as well as oftentimes more efficient. And not only that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, because of the way we do user modeling on the device itself, but without the data leaving the device, it's not only privacy preserving, it's often more accurate in terms of our ability to model the end user. But back to the flow. So advertisers buy ads over here, and then users are rewarded with tokens, and then, okay, let me just kind of take this one step at a time. I think this is a little bit too fast. So advertisers can decide to come into the system. They can purchase BAT, which is the medium of exchange here. They can take fiat and purchase some BAT, and they can use this BAT to run some advertising campaigns. As these advertising campaigns are run, users get prompts within their browsing experience every once in a while, and our focus is on making sure that these prompts are not too frequent and not something that the average user, let's say, finds particularly annoying. Because if they do so, then they'll just turn them off, and that's the end of the story. That's not the outcome that we'd like to have. If users choose to click on these ads, they'll be rewarded with BAT, for the act of viewing these ads, because we believe that attention of the end user should be valued and rewarded in a way that's very, very direct in the form of cryptocurrency. And once users accumulate more and more BAT in their in-browser wallet, they can decide what to do with this amount, right? With this crypto, and they can. There's a range of choices, and we are adding more choices as time goes by. But currently, they can either contribute these funds back into the system, and we have a system where they can basically, as they browse, they can contribute the funds they have in their wallet over, let's say, months, to the publishers that they spend the majority of their time on. Yes, if I go to TechCrunch, for example, at the end of the month, TechCrunch will essentially receive a check from Brave in the form of BAT that they'll decide to settle because of the sheer number of users from Brave that go to that site. Furthermore, as time goes by, we are looking to add more and more services along the same lines. And I think I'll give you some examples of tipping on different services. And I'll give you other examples of things like paywalls that we want to support, as well as other services we can deliver through the browser. But the goal here is to make it so it's possible to earn BAT as well as to spend BAT within the context of a single browser, right? So there's this end-to-end experience with the end user. So they don't necessarily have to purchase BAT from fiat. They don't have to come in from fiat. They don't have to. It's essentially, it's an enclosed ecosystem. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, advertisers, if they want to come in, typically they would come in with some amount of fiat, and they would purchase BAT, and that will be that. Similarly, publishers, though, typically what they'll want to do, while they will receive BAT at the end of the month, they might choose to convert that into fiat if that's what they want. So this is a system that we've been running for some months now. We have some statistics, and I'll show you a little bit of that as well. And that's essentially been the focus of the last, I don't know, N months of our work at the company. Oops, this is an animation that's gone a little bit crazy. Sorry about that. But if you've opted into Brave Rewards, which is this advertising system that I explained in the last slide, if you go to this URL, brave/reward, brave://rewards in your browser, you'll be able to see all these gory details of your interaction with the Brave ad ecosystem. So specifically, you'll see some details over here at the top about your earnings. And this is just an example screen. This is not real numbers, but just to give you an idea of what this is about, right? So basically, current earnings for the months are shown over there. And then, over there, tells you about, contributions that you can sign up for over there, which is to say, you are allowing Brave to essentially spend 10 of your BET across the publishers that you visit the most, right? And then if I scroll down a little bit more, hopefully I'll be able to see some other details here. So for example, here I see that my tips and monthly contributions go to some of these players listed at the bottom here. So there's a monthly contribution to somebody whose name is Bart Baker on YouTube in the amount of 5 BAT. And then there is a one-time contribution to The Guardian of 12 BAT, and then also Brandon Ike on Twitter of 7 BAT. Okay, sounds good. And then on the right, you also see some number of offers and things like that. These are not necessarily the experiences we have enabled now, but this is just to give you a glimpse of some of the coming attractions. There are a few other things that, depending on the build of the browser, you might or might not be able to see on a screen like this, as well as the new tab page of the browser as well, which we're using to pilot some of these experiences as well. But hopefully you get the basic idea, right? So you see both the earning part when it comes to BET, as well as the spending part when it comes to BET. Although some of these details will keep changing as we update the product according to some of the feedback we're getting in the marketplace, as well as from end users, I think some of the principles will stay more or less the same. Okay, so, all right, so what's going on here? Right, so this shows at the center of the picture, it shows your wallet. In this case, in the mobile version of Brave over here, which has a tally, basically like, you can go and click and view a monthly statement and so on and so forth. But the point is that there are different ways to get money into your wallet. So you can get BET from viewing ads, as I said before. There are kind of other models, such as what's called Brave offers, although the names will keep changing. In principle, you can also fund your wallet through the use of an exchange, like, for example, Coinbase or some other one. Or, in the future, I think we might support funding of these wallets with the help of like a normal bank account as well. As you might imagine, when it comes to this, there are concerns that have to do with KYCing users and things of that sort, and I'm happy to talk about that if there are questions about this aspect of things as well. How do we get the money out, or in what ways does the user get the money out? Well, so I already mentioned most of these things, right? So basically, it's publisher subscriptions. So you can basically set it up so there's a monthly subscription. Content purchases, we don't quite have that yet, right? So I think fairly soon we'll start enabling some of these scenarios as well. So the scenario that I've talked about for quite a while is that of going to like a premium video site, let's say, and then being able to pay for a movie, which would normally cost, let's say, €2 or €3 in the form of BAT from your wallet, and making that purchase process as seamless as possible. Right? So basically, the purchase can be made in crypto. The user would start viewing this. The experience of viewing it would be really smooth. This would be part of their statement within their BAT wallet, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of thing that we'd like to enable here as well. What I'll showcase a little bit later, maybe a couple slides down, there's this creator tips and contributions thing, right? So, and this works especially well for YouTube channels, right? So I'll give you an example of that, and hopefully that will be a little bit more clear. Then the next to last item here is actually e-commerce, right? I mean, although it's actually a lot more complicated than it sounds, but in principle, right? In principle, it's not so difficult to imagine that, you know, if you have the moral equivalent of, like, say, I don't know, 15, 20 euros in your wallet, you should be able to make purchases on Amazon as well, right? We don't have that working yet. This is not something that we currently support, but I think in principle, this is a direction that we'd like to pursue as well. And last but not least, of course, I wanted to mention and highlight dApp purchases, right? And so basically interactions with dApps, right? So if you have BAT in your wallet and then your dApp wants Ethereum, there is no reason not to basically make the conversion almost instantaneously and make it possible for users who care about these scenarios to support exactly that. But again, I mean, let me kind of, without offending anybody in the audience, let me highlight the fact that it's sort of these things at the top of the list, if you will, that will appeal to wider masses. So while we don't really want to, de-emphasize the experience of dApp usage and that whole flow, we certainly would very much want to make that as seamless as possible. Certainly, if you want to appeal to a broad category of users, we would like to go sort of to the beginning of that funnel as much as we can. All right, so this is a little bit about the ICO. So I don't want to talk about this almost at all. This is the same Bermuda Triangle of advertising. Look, this was some years ago. By now, I think there is not very much conversation about this at the company. So, I mean, let me just kind of continue and talk about something else. This is actually something that's quite recent. This is called the Brave Transparency Report. If you go to brave.com/transparency, this is more or less what you'll see. So this gives you the ability to keep tabs on our progress in a very, very kind of direct manner. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see, and it's unfortunately the fonts are too small to see, but if you go to the website, you'll just see this for yourselves, number one. So I'll give you this incentive to go and visit the site. But secondly, I'll just explain what these different parts mean. So left-hand side talks about publishers. And again, we use this term publishers or creators very, very broadly, because if you look at the categories of publishers and creators, you'll see that currently Brave has some 262,000 YouTube channels that have gone through the Brave verification process. So they've gone to, creators.brave.com, and they've done the KYC and so on and so forth, and now they're part of the ecosystem. There are some 44,000 websites, right? So like Wikipedia is one of them, for example, and many, many others as well, and many, many blog sites, and all sorts of other things as well. Some 50,000 Twitter accounts have gone through this process as well. Some 26,000 Reddit accounts, about 10,000 GitHub accounts, and so on and so forth. And so these numbers are growing quite steadily. So I think in total we have close to 500,000, I'd say, publishers that have gone through Brave's verification process as part of the ecosystem. So as a result of that, they're able to receive contributions from browser users. So this is on the left. On the right, we have advertising purchasing BAT to run campaigns, to run their campaigns. And you see some of these transactions, and you can go and verify some of these conversions for yourself if you follow those links. And that's an important part of how money enters the system, so to speak. Remember that three-part slide that I showed to you just a couple of minutes ago? So that's kind of what it's about, right? But the first, the origin of funds is that of advertising entering the system, and this is what this is highlighting at the top of the slide on the right. And last but not least, At the bottom, we have ongoing advertising campaigns. And so this is, I think, about a month old, this specific screenshot, I would argue. Yeah, roughly about a month old, I think. But so as of that time, we had about 70-something campaigns in the US. We had 37 in the UK. We had 22 in France. We had, I don't know, 5 in Argentina, and so on and so forth. But this gives you a glimpse of the geo-distribution when it comes to campaigns that are run through this mechanism. And of course, there are many, many technical details here I'm omitting. So for example, to do user modeling on the client, it really helps to understand their language. Our ability to model English-speaking users is a lot better than it is for other languages, although that's also improving, and so on and so forth. But this gives you a rough sense of what we've been doing in the space of privacy-preserving advertising within the browser. So this is what I mentioned to you before. This is how publishers get on board. They go to creators.brave.com. They go click on the sign up thing, and effectively they go through the KYC. And I mentioned before, we support YouTube channels, Twitter, Twitch, Reddit, GitHub, as well as others. So you can go instead of starting somebody on GitHub, which is wonderful, or somebody's projects on GitHub, you can effectively now start tipping them for their efforts as well, which is a pretty wonderful way to support open source efforts, isn't it? Okay. So in the context of this Brave Transparency Report, I wanted to point out something else. So for a while, I think for about almost 2 years now, there's been this website called badgrowth.com. And we actually have known about it for, almost the entire time they've been around. And basically what these guys have been doing is independently keeping track of Brave's progress. And, in many ways, keeping us honest, right? And so you can go to this website today, and you'll see numbers that are comparable to what I showed to you before. So a number of publishers, that's a little bit less than 500,000, and sort of this kind of breakdown that I mentioned to you as well. And you can go and drill in a little bit, right, by clicking on different links in this badgrowth.com website. And you'll see that, some of the top publishers, and these are websites. You'll see things like Wikipedia, for example, here. You'll see the Washington Post. You'll see archive.org, DuckDuckGo. By the way, DuckDuckGo is one of the supported privacy-friendly search engines that is supported and by Brave and is a partner of Brave's as well. You'll see things like, SourceForge.net, Vimeo is another one, and so on and so forth, right? So together with the Alexa ranking. And on the right, we have GitHub, because it's an example that's kind of near and dear to my heart personally. So we have, some users who've gone through the Brave verification process, and you can see on the right the number of followers they have, and you can sort of go and click on these things as well. So this is actually probably a good time to pause and kind of restate something that I posed in the beginning as one of the goals, which is to say, our goal is to change the web as it is, right, as it stands, right? And one of the ways to do so is by changing the way things are funded. So for easily 15, maybe even 20 years, we've had a web that is largely funded by advertising. And while this is sometimes desirable and sometimes is, maybe necessary evil, depending on your viewpoint, this gives you, what I'm showing here, gives you an alternative mechanism to funding creators online whose content you enjoy, right? And I think this is really quite a powerful reflection of some of these concepts. The fact that we have close to 500,000 of organizations that have chosen to become part of the Brave ecosystem in a relatively short time period, I think is really quite wonderful. What incentives do they have? Well, one of the incentives they have is that as the advertising system within the browser is becoming more and more popular, there are more and more people, more and more end users who are willing to contribute to these sites as they browse naturally. And at the end of the day, some of these sites might step away from the currently broken model of online advertising and shift away to a model that's a lot more clean and potentially a lot more lucrative for them as well, because by and large, most of these publishers are not really getting very much from the current ad model compared to where it was, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago. The payout are not nearly as significant as they used to be. So to me, this is actually a very kind of powerful reminder of the fact that we are doing reasonably well, actually, with respect to our stated goals of changing the way things are done online. I wanted to mention a couple of things about advertisers. So we're not disclosing who they are. We are kind of a little bit sheepish about some of that, but let me just mention one number. So we currently have a waiting list of over 10,000 advertisers who want to pay us money to advertise through the privacy-preserving, privacy-friendly platform that we've built at Brave. So that's a good position to be in, I would argue. So I have a series of slides on privacy. I might just skim through this because I think we don't have as much time, but let me just kind of highlight a couple of these points. So I mean, the same points about surveillance economy that I mentioned before, so that's one thing. The other thing is that we're building essentially a system of privacy-preserving ads. And so this is a number from October 2019, which was kind of early days. By now, the numbers have shifted down a little bit. But essentially, at that time, when we first released our system of advertising through the browser itself, we had a click-through rate of 14%, which is insanely high. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit that they've gone down a little bit since then. But certainly, for an industry average being way below 1%, a number like 14% click-through rate is insanely high. But it kind of shows you that you can design systems that combine the ideas and goals of privacy with the goal of performance, in this case, measured by the click-through rate. Okay, so this is just to kind of highlight some of the things that my team works on, which is a mix of some of this wonderful cryptography, including MPC, zero-knowledge proof, and progressive decentralization goals and things like that as well. And we'll actually be releasing more and more of the things that we work on. And again, let me highlight this URL, brave.com/research. If you want to learn more about some of the new things that are coming down the pipe, go and take a look, and you'll see a little bit more there than I have the time to cover today. Let me see. All right, so there is a video here that is kind of fun with this guy over here whose name is Bart Baker, I think. No? What's his name? Is that his name? I think that, oh no, this is somebody else. This is Phil DeFranco. So this is another dude on YouTube who is, well, he's very excited. That's all I can tell you. I don't remember too much about him. But that's not the point. The point is this. The point is that, basically as you browse this in Brave, there's this thing that you can click on, on the right there. And then as you click on that, there'll be this reward screen. And then there's a button that says send the tip. And if you're really, if you're equally excited, right? He's very excited. If you're also very excited in response to whatever he's saying, I think he's talking about sports, that's wonderful, okay, great. So then you click on that, and then there's a way for you to contribute some BAT. And so you have a menu that drops down over here, and you decide to spend, let's say, 5 BAT, and just send a tip. And there you go. And this is a little bit more about advertising as well. So you're browsing a web page like this, and as you do so, there might be an ad that comes out in the corner of the screen, and this is delivered not within the page. This is outside the page. And if you decide to click on a view over here, in this little, relatively non-obtrusive ad, then it will take you to a page that's a lot more fun. It will look like this. It's going to be an ad for Camry. It's sort of full screen almost, right? It's like a video of sorts, right? And basically, by viewing this thing, you just earn 5 BAT. Yeah? So I showed you an example of how you earn by clicking on this ad, and I showed you an example of how you spend, also 5 BAT, by clicking on, sending a tip to that guy who talks about sports. And that's what I wanted to do by closing this loop. And this is a little bit more about, settings. You can limit the number of ads. You can do things of that sort. You can go and play with this for yourself, essentially. But that's that. So I'm kind of out of time, and I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions because I'm sure you have a few. So we have actually like 6 or 7 minutes for questions, so I'm happy to take as many as you have. But before I do so, let me just kind of highlight. This was from a retreat a little bit, well, some months ago, I should say, in a warm place. The Brave team is about 110 people at the moment, so it's a pretty significant team, quite a number of individuals, fairly tech-heavy, I'd say. Easily 80 plus are doing some sort of technology-related function, engineers, PMs, researchers, what have you. And yeah, I think that's probably most of what I'd like to share as of today. Happy to take as many questions as you have.
Thank you. So we have some time for questions. Questions? Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm a proud Brave user here. And I was wondering if you're experiencing a willingness from the advertisers to pay a higher fee for the ads, because of course the people are choosing to see them, not just, they're not hit by them. So if you can elaborate a bit on that. Thank you.
It's a good question. So it's probably a little bit too early to tell. In a certain sense, advertisers don't necessarily have a particularly accurate mental model when it comes to these kinds of ads, because for decades, quite literally, they've been trained to think about online advertising in a fairly specific term. And I don't know if you know about the gory details of RTB and things like that, but it's a whole, I mean, it's like entire professions that are based on this or built on this, right? So I think this is really quite new. I think there's quite a lot of education that we need to do about what it means to have a privacy-preserving ad ecosystem. They don't necessarily understand that. They don't often get it, even after we explain it a few times. So there is some flexibility, I think, when it comes to pricing, but I don't know that I can generalize based on any of this. It's just early days. As I said, when I mentioned the 14% click-through rate, which is like staggering, I think we shouldn't generalize and kind of extrapolate based on too little data.
Another question? Okay.
Well, actually, I have two questions. The first is, how do you prevent the people just watching and not being interested at all in the ads, and finally, the advertiser does not reconduct his campaigns?
Yeah, so the question is about ad fraud. What do we do about that? Well, so it's a gift that keeps on giving, let's say, right? So there is no kind of ultimate solution to ad fraud when it comes to client-side shenanigans, right? And I wish I could tell you that blockchain magically, you know, you sprinkle some pixie dust and it all goes away. And yeah, it doesn't, right? Because you can automate this stuff. You can have bots. You can have armies of humans who can be compensated for that as well. And yeah, it's a mix of, let's say, defense strategies, some of which we publicize, and some of which have come out of research, and others that we are not as open about, let's say, that we have to apply. So it's, I mean, yeah, it's a mix of strategies, some of which work well on mobile, and actually even better on mobile, and others work on desktop, and that's that. So if you are curious about some of the details, I can point you to a paper that talks about some of them that we are openly talking about. And let's probably leave it at that on a big stage.
Perfect. And the second question, how legal or how ethical is it to trigger something to the user that was not designed by the website that is visited? I mean, I'm a website. You can trigger an ad for a competitor. So how legal, how ethical, how acceptable is it? How brave are you to do this?
So the ads I showcased kind of a few slides ago, a few minutes ago, are outside of the browser Chrome even, right? They're part of the operating system notification. And that's exactly how they come up on a mobile device, right? I mean, the same way you have a notification from Twitter or something, the same way you'd have this, right? It's just the thing that your mobile application sends as a notification. So it's not really associated with the web page that's being browsed at the moment. Now, in principle, you're right in that we can, create undesirable situations and outcomes if we're not careful, and there are indeed limitations as to what kind of ads are, let's say, even allowed, right? Things that have to do with advertising alcohol, for example, is kind of notorious for that, and so we need to be quite careful, and this is actually one of the reasons we are fairly careful when it comes to selecting advertisers as well, right? I mean, despite having a very long waiting list, we are not too keen to take everybody on either, because we just want to make sure we're not, courting controversy, let's say, when it comes to some of these things. But again, it's something that you design solutions for the foreseeable future. There are relatively few particularly easy answers, right? So you have to be really quite thoughtful about how you do user modeling and what you allow and what you don't allow. And there's some stuff that's kind of rule-based and so on and so forth. There is no kind of just add water type of solution that I can recommend to you. So many of these things have to be properly analyzed in terms of like threat analysis and so on and so forth. Here?
Last question is okay?
Yeah, of course. Over there. Well, 2 questions actually even.
I was wondering if you could explain how pricing is set for the advertisers.
How, what again?
Pricing.
For what?
For, like, if I'm an advertiser and I want to place ads on Brave, if I negotiate directly with content creators or if you are an intermediary, and if so, how do you set the price?
Right. So at the moment we are an intermediary, and that's, I think, how it will stay for the foreseeable future. Although one can wonder, one can ask a question as to, well, how do you decentralize this part of it, for example? And I think I would argue it's actually really difficult to do so properly without being, subject to Sybil attacks and things of that sort. I think it's really difficult to figure out some of these pricing mechanisms, although we'd like it to be not the case, let's say, right? So far, we're being really quite cautious and conservative when it comes to this. So it's a manual process.
And just to follow up, how do you determine the pricing as the middleman for the advertisers?
I still couldn't hear.
How do you determine the pricing for the advertisers? Like, how is that set?
Well, it's just subject to negotiation with them, right? So that's all it is. Nothing different from that. There's another question in the back, or in the middle, maybe.
Can we use BAT on Twitch and other platforms and YouTube? And also, can we cancel donation of BAT? If you...
So I still couldn't understand that, sorry. You'll have to say it again.
Can we use BAT, the donation system, on Twitch?
Yeah, so Twitch is supported. So you have the ability to tip Twitch, what do you call them, pages, channels, creators. Yeah, Twitch is one of the supported. Actually, I'm surprised I didn't have a slide on Twitter, because that's by far the most obvious one, right? So you basically, on Twitter, you just have, retweet button, and then like a like button, and then there's a donate button that the browser adds to the UI, and that's that. And the Twitch experience is a little bit different, but in principle, it's similar to what I showed on YouTube, essentially. Yeah. So there was actually quite a lot of demand from Twitch users, because apparently some of them want to make money by running these channels, Twitch channels.
Also, can we cancel a donation of BAT? If you...
What?
Can we cancel a donation? Cancel, yeah.
Who would cancel what? I missed that.
When you make a donation of BAT, can we...
or can you claw it back, so to speak?
Take it back, yeah.
No, generally not. I mean, and this is one of the reasons we don't support huge amounts, right? So 5 BAT at the time of writing that slide was like 77 USD cents. So that's not like the end of the world, right? But generally, we would like to avoid some of these kinds of things, right? Certainly, if it comes to large amounts, I think we'll make it for an experience where it's more difficult to make a mistake. I think there was another question over here on this side, maybe. Yeah, one more.
We don't have time.
Out of questions?
No.
I mean, out of time, rather.
So they can talk to you off
That sounds
stage, I
good.
guess.
Right, thanks.
So thank you.
Super, thanks.
Dr.
Thanks very much.